The moment that changed my life didn't come with shouting, tears, or slammed doors. It came quietly, disguised as a casual sentence tossed over a shoulder, one she thought meant nothing. By the time she realized what she'd handed me, it was already too late. Before I tell you how that night unfolded, do me a favor. If stories about dignity, consequences, and starting over resonate with you, hit subscribe, tap like, and leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. It helps more than you know, and this story only gets deeper. Now let me take you back that I'd been married to Laura for 6 years. On paper, we looked solid. No big scandals, no dramatic blow-ups. Just two adults sharing a house, a schedule, and a life that slowly stopped feeling like a partnership. Somewhere around year 4, things shifted. She landed a new job at a consulting firm downtown, one of those sleek glass buildings where everyone dressed sharp and stayed late. New friends followed. New habits. Nights out that didn't include me. At first, I told myself this was normal. People grow. They need space. I wasn't the jealous type, and I didn't want to be the husband who clipped his wife's wings. So I kept quiet. I cooked my own dinners, watched games alone, learned to enjoy the silence. Then there was Brian. He was her best friend from work. That phrase became a regular part of our household vocabulary. Brian said this. Brian thought that. Brian and I grabbed lunch. Brian and I stayed late. Brian texted me. Brian needed advice. Brian. His name showed up more often than mine. The first time I said it made me uncomfortable, she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a dismissive one. She told me I was insecure, that I didn't understand modern friendships, that men and women could be close without it meaning anything. Maybe she was right. Or maybe I just recognized the pattern because I'd seen it before in other people's marriages. The night everything broke started like the last few Fridays had. I was in the kitchen, cutting vegetables, planning a quiet evening. She wasn't dressed to stay in. She came downstairs wearing a fitted black dress, the kind you don't wear unless you want to be noticed. Her hair was perfect, makeup flawless. She smelled like the expensive perfume I'd given her for Christmas, the one she said she was saving. That I looked up and asked, calmly, "You're going out again?" She stopped and turned toward me with a look I barely recognized. Cold, distant, like I was an inconvenience. Yes, it's Friday. I work hard. I deserve to have fun. With Brian? I asked. With Brian and some people from work, she snapped. It's not a crime to have friends. I set the knife down. This isn't about friends. It's about respect. That's when her face hardened. She cut me off mid-sentence and said the words that changed everything. If you don't like how I live my life, she said, emphasizing every syllable, then just leave. The room went silent except for running water I'd forgotten to turn off. She grabbed her purse, checked her phone, and headed for the door. I'll be back late. Don't wait up. The door closed. Her car pulled away. The red lights disappeared down the street. That I stood there alone, replaying her tone more than her words. There was no concern, no hesitation, no fear of losing me, just certainty that I'd still be there when she got back, exactly where she'd left me. She was wrong. 5 minutes later, I walked upstairs and opened the closet. My side was neat. Hers was chaos. I took out my phone and made the first call, then the second, then the third. No speeches, no explanations. Just action. As I started packing what was mine, only what was mine, I felt something unexpected settle in. Not rage, not grief. Clarity. She'd told me to leave, and for the first time in a long while, I realized I finally could. I didn't cry while I packed. That surprised me. 6 years of marriage reduced to what fit in a couple of suitcases, and still, nothing broke inside me. I moved with purpose, folding shirts, pulling documents from the file cabinet, grabbing the things that had meaning before she ever entered my life. My grandfather's signed baseball, old family photos, tools I'd bought with my own money. I left everything else exactly where it was, like a museum exhibit of a life that no longer belonged to me. The house felt different once I started removing myself from it. Quieter, honest, like it had been waiting for the truth to surface. I didn't rush, but I didn't hesitate either. Every item I picked up answered one simple question. Is this mine? If the answer wasn't yes, it stayed. The first to arrive was Mark, a friend I'd known since college. He pulled up in his truck, took one look at my face, and didn't ask why. Where do you want me? He said. That's how you know who your people are. Not the ones who ask for explanations, but the ones who show up ready to work. 20 minutes later, my brother Daniel arrived with Chris, another friend who owed me a favor from years back. No one raised their voice. No one made jokes. We moved like a quiet crew with a shared understanding that this wasn't a debate or a breakdown. It was a decision. Around midnight, Daniel paused and asked, "You sure about this?" I didn't even have to think. She told me to leave. He nodded once. Then let's finish. By the time we were done, my side of the closet was bare. Empty hangers swayed slightly, like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence. I walked downstairs alone and wrote a note. One line. No anger. No explanation. Just the truth. I placed my wedding ring beside it, right where she couldn't miss it that I didn't leave through the front door. I walked out through the garage, pulled it shut behind me, and felt something lift the second it closed. Mark asked where I was headed. Your place, if that's still okay. He smiled. As long as you need. The drive was quiet. Empty streets. No traffic. My phone stayed face down. I wasn't ready to hear anything she might say, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about that at Mark's place. I grabbed one suitcase and left the rest in the truck. I checked my phone out of habit more than curiosity. Nothing. No calls. No messages. She wasn't home, yet that I slept straight through the night that I woke up before my alarm, alert in a way I hadn't felt in months. My body felt lighter, like tension I'd grown used to had finally released. Mark was already up, coffee brewing. He slid a mug across the table without a word. What's the plan? He asked that I told him. Separate accounts. Cancel shared utilities. Call a lawyer. Handle it clean. He nodded like this was the most logical thing in the world. Because to him, it was .by mid-morning, my phone lit up. Missed calls. Messages stacking up fast. I didn't read them closely. I didn't need to. The pattern was obvious even at a glance. Confusion, anger, panic, bargaining. The last one said we needed to talk and accused me of being childish. Mark laughed when I showed him. That's rich. I didn't respond. Instead, I got dressed and left for the bank. The manager, Thomas, kept things professional but gave me a look that said he understood more than he was letting on. I moved my money, left just enough behind to cover my share of the rent, and opened a new account across town. One signature at a time, I untangled myself. From there, I drove straight to a law office recommended by a coworker. The attorney, Rebecca Collins, listened without interrupting, pen moving steadily as I spoke. When I finished, she looked up and said, "You want this clean and final?" "Yes." She smiled. "Good. That makes my job easier." When I walked back out into the daylight, something settled in my chest. Not relief exactly, but resolve. This wasn't a reaction anymore. It was a direction that I didn't know what tomorrow would look like. I didn't try to imagine it. All I knew was that for the first time in a long while, every step I took was my own. By the time I pulled into my brother Daniel's driveway that night, the sun was already dipping low, the sky streaked with orange and gray like it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Fitting. Mark had called earlier to warn me she'd shown up at his place, pounding on the door, demanding answers. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. I just adjusted my course and kept moving forward. Daniel opened the door, took one look at me, and stepped aside. "You're safe here," he said. No speeches, no advice, just a fact. He set me up in his spare room, which doubled as an office, and left me alone. That silence felt earned. My phone, on the other hand, was anything but quiet. Missed calls stacked into the dozens. Messages poured in from unfamiliar numbers, then familiar ones. Her sister, her parents, friends I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly acting like mediators. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I started blocking numbers one by one. Not out of spite, out of necessity. Boundaries aren't cruel. They're survival. The next morning, I woke early again. No alarm, just clarity. Daniel was already at his desk, laptop open, coffee steaming. "You holding up?" he asked. "Better than I expected," I said. And it was true that I spent the day tying off loose ends. Changed my mailing address. Updated my emergency contact at work. Removed her name from anything that tied us together administratively. Each task felt strangely satisfying, like checking items off a list I'd avoided for too long. Late afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I answered without thinking. "This is Brian," the voice said. Tense and rushed, I said nothing. He cleared his throat. "Look, man, I didn't realize things were that bad. She told me you two were basically living separate lives, that you were okay with everything." "She lied," I said out of pause. "Yeah, I'm starting to see that." He rushed to explain, saying nothing physical had happened, that he was backing off, that the situation was too complicated. I listened, detached. When he finished, I said, "You don't need to explain anything to me." He hung up quickly, and just like that, the guy who'd taken up so much space in my marriage vanished the moment reality showed up. I wasn't surprised. I'd seen that pattern before too. That evening, I met Mark for dinner at a small sports bar. We sat in a booth near the back, noise and laughter filling the space around us. Normal life happening everywhere. He told me she'd come by again, calmer this time, asking questions, fishing for information. He hadn't given her anything. I thanked him. "She hates not being in control," he said. "I know." I replied that my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time, a message. She said we'd taken vows, that people don't quit when things get hard. I stared at the words for a long moment, then typed a single reply. "You told me to leave." I did. I blocked the number before she could respond. Back at Daniel's place, I showered, changed, and sat on the edge of the bed, letting the day catch up to me. I wasn't angry. That part was already done. I'd spent months being angry quietly, swallowing it to keep the peace. What I felt now was something steadier. Self-respect. The following days blurred into a rhythm. Work. Paperwork. Evenings spent with people who didn't ask me to justify myself. My boss, Margaret, pulled me aside one afternoon after a brief incident at the office involving Laura showing up unannounced. She assured me it was handled, that my job was safe, that she had my back. That mattered more than I expected. One night, just before sleep, a final message slipped through from yet another number. A desperate claim meant to pull me back into conversation. I forwarded it straight to Rebecca, my attorney, without comment. Her reply came quickly. "Noted. Do not engage." I turned my phone off and lay back, staring at the ceiling. The man I'd been, the one who would have chased explanations, tried to fix what wasn't fixable, felt distant now. Like someone I used to know that I didn't know what the next weeks would bring. I didn't try to predict outcomes or imagine endings. All I knew was this. I had stopped reacting, and I had started choosing. And that changed everything. The weeks that followed settled into something I hadn't felt in a long time. Routine without tension. I woke up early, went to work, came home without wondering who she was with or when she'd stumble through the door. Silence stopped feeling empty and started feeling earned. Daniel gave me space, which I appreciated more than conversation. We'd share coffee in the mornings, exchange a few words, then go about our days like two adults who understood that sometimes support doesn't need commentary. At work, I buried myself in details. Purchase orders, delivery schedules, inventory spreadsheets. Simple problems with clear solutions. My supervisor, Margaret, checked in once more, quietly letting me know she'd instructed reception not to transfer any calls from Laura. No drama, no judgment, just professionalism and understanding. I thanked her, probably more sincerely than I realized. Having stability in one part of my life made everything else feel manageable. One evening, Daniel came into the living room with an odd look on his face. "You're not going to like this," he said. "What?" "She's outside. With her parents." I walked to the window and saw the car parked across the street. 3 figures inside, sitting there like they were waiting for something. Or someone. I didn't feel fear. Or anger. Just a dull recognition of desperation when I saw it. "I'm not going out there," I said. Daniel nodded. "Didn't think you would." They stayed for hours. No knocking. No calls. Just sitting in the dark. Eventually, the car pulled away. The quiet afterward felt heavier, but also final in a way I couldn't quite explain. The next day, Rebecca called. Calm voice. A fishing update. Paperwork was moving. Some resistance on the other end. Nothing unexpected. She reminded me again not to engage directly. "Let the process work," she said. "You've done what you needed to do." That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went to church, not out of habit or obligation, but because I needed somewhere neutral, somewhere untouched by the mess I'd just walked out of. I sat in the back, listened. The message was about letting go of what weighs you down. I didn't look for meaning in it. It found me anyway. Afterward, a couple I'd known for years stopped me. They didn't pry. They didn't ask where Laura was. They just told me it was good to see me. One of them squeezed my arm and said, "Take care of yourself." That was it. No sides taken. No advice given. Just kindness. That night, back at Daniel's, my phone rang from another unfamiliar number. I answered out of reflex. A man's voice, sharp and aggressive, accused me of abandoning my wife, told me I should handle things like a real man. I hung up mid-sentence. No argument. No defense. The old version of me would have engaged. The new one didn't see the point. Daniel looked over from the couch. "You good?" "Yeah," I said. And I meant it. A few days later, Rebecca called again, this time with a different tone. Not urgent, just informative. Things were shifting. Pressure was meeting reality. I didn't ask for details. I trusted her to handle it. That same afternoon, on a long lunch break, I drove through an older neighborhood across town. Tree-lined streets, modest houses, places built for living, not impressing. One of them caught my eye. Nothing special at first glance, but something about it felt steady, grounded. I wrote down the address and moved on, not attaching meaning to it yet. That evening, Mark dragged me to the gym. I hadn't worked out properly in months. Stress had taken priority over health. The first few minutes were rough, but then my body remembered. Movement burned off more than tension. It reminded me I still existed outside of paperwork and phone calls. Afterward, standing in the parking lot, Mark asked the question no one else had. "How are you actually feeling?" I thought about it before answering. "Relieved," I said. "I was sad a long time ago. I just didn't admit it then." He nodded like that made perfect sense. That night, lying on the futon, staring at the ceiling, I realized something important. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for apologies. Not for explanations. Not for closure from anyone else. I was building something quiet and solid inside myself. And whatever came next, good or bad, I knew I'd meet it standing upright. The final stretch didn't arrive with fireworks. It came quietly, the way real endings usually do. One morning bled into the next, and somewhere along the way, the chaos stopped knocking. The calls slowed. The messages dried up. The noise faded until all that was left was my own routine and the strange peace that came with it. That I moved out of Daniel's place on a Saturday morning. Not because he asked, but because it was time. Mark helped me load the truck. Cracking jokes like this was just another move, not the closing chapter of a marriage. We drove across town to a small house I'd put an offer on weeks earlier. 2 bedrooms. Old paint. Solid bones. Nothing impressive, everything honest. When the keys hit my palm, something clicked into place. This wasn't a rebound. It wasn't an escape. It was mine. That first night, I slept on an air mattress in an empty room. No pictures on the walls. No television. Just boxes, quiet, and the low hum of a house settling around me. I didn't miss the old place. Not for a second. I realized then that home isn't where you compromise yourself to keep the peace. It's where you don't have to explain why you're breathing easier. Work noticed the difference too. Margaret called me into her office one afternoon and slid a folder across the desk. Promotion. Senior coordinator. She said I'd earned it. I didn't argue. I'd shown up every day, handled my responsibilities, and kept my personal life from spilling into my job. That mattered more than charisma ever would. The legal process wrapped itself up the same way it began, efficiently. Rebecca called with the final update on a Tuesday afternoon. Papers signed. Terms accepted. No more resistance. No more games. I thanked her and meant it. When the official envelope arrived weeks later, I opened it at my own kitchen table, coffee brewing in a machine I'd chosen and paid for myself. I read it once, filed it away, and went to work. No ceremony, just closure. Life filled in the gaps slowly. Furniture came from thrift stores and friends. I built my own kitchen table on a Saturday afternoon, hands-sore but satisfied. I went back to church occasionally, not out of obligation, but because it grounded me. People didn't ask questions. They just nodded, like they'd known all along this was where things were headed. One evening, months later, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Curiosity won. It was her. Short, direct, an apology without excuses. She said I deserved better. I stared at the screen longer than I expected, then typed back, I know. And that was the truth. I blocked the number and set the phone down, feeling nothing but certainty. That night, Mark and Daniel came over for dinner. Burgers on the grill, beer in the fridge, a game on the television. At one point, Mark raised his bottle and said, "To new chapters." To self-respect, I replied. We laughed. We ate. We talked about normal things, work, plans, nothing heavy. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't rebuilding anymore. I was living. I learned something through all of this, something I wish I'd understood years earlier. You can't love someone into respecting you. You can't fix a relationship when only one person is trying. But you can choose yourself. You can walk away with dignity. And you can build a life that doesn't require you to beg for a seat at the table. She told me to leave if I didn't like her life. She thought I wouldn't do it. She thought I'd stay quiet. Instead, I listened, and that decision changed everything. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between peace and familiarity, do me a favor. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Your support helps keep these stories alive, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll see you in the next one.